Welcome to Living the Reclaim Life podcast. I'm Denisha, and we're glad you're here for conversations that revive hope, inspire healing, and encourage you to live a vibrant life with Christ. So grab a cup of coffee as we chat with today's guest. Today's podcast episode is sponsored by the Gudgel family in honor of their daughter's birthday.
Happy birthday, Valerie, from Mom and Dad. We are so proud of you and your faithful walk with Christ through both good times and difficult times. You recently said, "This is the year of God's favor in our family." So as a birthday blessing, we'd like to speak this scripture over you as you live out being a child of God, following his call, a wife, a mother, and a friend to many. Psalm 90, verse 17. May the favor of the Lord our God rest upon you, Valerie. May he establish for you the work of your hands. We love you, Mom and Dad.
Oh, thank you so much. Happy birthday, Valerie. Well, hello there. I cannot wait for you to meet today's guest. Valerie McMahon is a friend of mine, and I am just so excited to have her on this episode. Today, we're going to talk about something that I think can be a tough subject. We're going to talk about marriage, and we're going to talk about what happens in your marriage when you're going through a hard time and you have a fear that nothing is going to change. What do you do in that? How do you reach out during that time? How do you process that? Valerie is a wonderful wife. She's also a chaos manager, right? 4 kids, and she's awesome. Her kids are amazing. She's an inspirational writer, speaker, Bible teacher, and you guys, we are so excited to have her with Reclaim Story on our team as a content contributor and a ministry leader. So we are so excited. Valerie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
And you know, it's funny, our kids went to school together. And then I put some textbooks on Facebook Marketplace. And then next thing you know, it's the beginning of COVID, right? And so we had to meet at a gas station and, keep our distance as we exchanged, textbooks. And it was so neat to hear what God was doing in your life. So why don't you catch our listeners up on what is he doing in your life and where is he taking you in ministry?
Well, I grew up in a Christian home, which I'm very thankful for. So I had parents that loved Jesus and taught me how to follow him and serve him. I had a wonderful example growing up of seeing my parents serve the Lord in church. And so really at the age of only 13, I knew I wanted to go to Bible college. I knew I wanted to be in ministry in some way. I loved acting and drama. So I was going to go to this Bible college in California. I had this traveling drama group. And so I was already focused on going there. And we moved from California to wonderful Tucson, Arizona when I was 16. I know everybody go, oh, yes, San Diego to Tucson. Oh. But God had a purpose in that. And it was during this time of growing up in Tucson as a teenager that I got to experience my first mission trip and go to other countries and serve the poor. And so when I got to Bible college, I found out the drama group I had waited to be a part of canceled. And so I'm like, what now, God? I want to be in ministry, but what now? And so it took a year for God to show me that he wanted me to indeed study missions and be involved in that kind of ministry. But God has used me in all different kinds of ministries. I've been thankful for that. My husband and I served as campus ministers during the first 5 years we were married. And I've done various ministries as a mom. But God, especially through my journey, the last, I would say, 5, 6, 7 years in my life, and we're going to talk about that a little bit, really has conditioned my heart and called my heart to minister to women. And so I think that's why we got reconnected so fast, is because as we shared what God was calling us to do, we realized that we had the same heart to help women have hope in their struggles and claim their past, as we've talked about.
So now, if I remember correctly, you started a ministry out of your bed to women.
What? Yes.
How do you do that?
Well, 2020, right? It happened in 2020. So lots of, strange things. But yeah, like I said, a few years ago, I was starting to feel this pull from the Lord to minister to women. I did some things like with my friends, Bible studies, different things like that. I had a lot of dreams. I had a dream of starting a women's retreat and just speaking and teaching and helping women heal. And doors just kept closing. But last year, 2020, I found out literally a few days, I say, before the world shut down in March, that I needed emergency eye surgery. And I had a detached retina. So that was a little scary, going into the eye doctor to find out the next day you're having surgery. Well, little did I know that process of recovery was going to require 5 weeks of bed rest, 1 solid week of 24-hour bed rest, laying on one side, and then 4 weeks after of being up half the day and then half the day in bed. And so really, Denisha, I often say God used eye surgery to do soul surgery and bring me to a point of saying, this is the door I'm opening for you. I want you to minister to women in an online format on Facebook. And so it's been quite a journey, but just being able to share my struggles and my story and help shine the spotlight of Scripture and help women have hope and healing has been just, has helped me really continue to heal, but just been such a joy to connect with women as we heal together.
And it's been very encouraging I'm in Valerie's group. It's been very encouraging to be a part of that and hear her teaching and the constant encouragement. So I know I really appreciate that. And you have quite the group there too. Pretty amazing people in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some amazing ladies there. And so God calls you into starting an online ministry, right? Which is so great, you guys. Can we not say like the platforms that are available right now to us for free to get, encouragement out to people, even though we're all isolated in so many ways, just amazing, right? And at the same time, you have a dream about a children's book.
Well, it's actually kind of a dream come true. I mean, really, with kind of backing up with the story that led me to the online ministry, is when I turned 40 a few years ago, I started writing kind of like a bucket list. And, I don't know, you start to think about those things. And I wrote down, write a children's book. And it's not that I, in that time, was like, okay, I'm going to go sit in my room and continue to write children's books the rest of my life. But I had 4 children, and it was something apparently my mom keeps telling me I said as a child I wanted to be. And so I just wrote something that was near to my heart that I was trying to teach my children, which was about how to honor one another, taken from Philippians 2, where the Bible talks about how we should put others above ourselves. We teach our kids to be kind and to be nice, but to go beyond that, like, how do you really put somebody's needs above your own? And I think it's in some ways kind of a lost word in our culture of the word honor. What does it mean to honor one another? And so my kids are real into animals and even kind of exotic animals. We had a bearded dragon for a while. So my story's key character is a chameleon. So hopefully if there's moms out there listening who don't have a book about a chameleon, you're going to hopefully get one soon. But yeah, so that dream is coming true right now. But that kind of began really me just starting to write. And of course, I love the stories in the Bible. And so I started writing devotions and things to encourage women. And like I said, that's what eventually led to just, okay, God, how do you want to use this desire for me to communicate biblical truth through inspirational writing? And like I said, eventually last year, he led it to be able to put it on a public platform, which was honestly a little scary. But, during a time where the world was shutting down, people, especially women, I think, became so hungry for connection. And so it was just, a beautiful way of God showing he can use any situation, any hard situation, right? That we're about to talk about the rest of this podcast, any hard and difficult circumstance, to be able to help people know him. And he did. So,
talking about marriage today. And marriage is beautiful and hard all at the same time. And there are times, I think, in our marriage, especially when we have hard times, when we might get stuck in the fear of, what if things never change? What if this is as good as it gets? And guys, that's what we're going to talk about today with Valerie, because she's walked there. She's walked in those shoes. And I think she's come out with some pretty big wisdom from God of just what to do and how to stand through it and what to put your focus on. So Valerie, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity. And of course, my husband knows I'm sharing this too, and we can speak about it because God has brought so much healing. And I know everybody's marriages are different. So I don't feel necessarily the need to focus on, specifically what all the issues that led to our struggle. But we both, like every marriage, you enter a marriage, you both have a past and you both are imperfect people trying to love each other the best you can. And so sometimes those things catch up with you. But for me, especially, part of my story that really entered into my marriage in ways that I didn't expect was that in 1999, I lost my only sibling and brother. He passed away by suicide. And that was, of course, a very tragic and shocking moment in our family's history. And I didn't, of course, realize at that time, but even as I journeyed in my marriage with my husband, I started eventually to see how much loss played a part in the expectations of my husband and the dependence on him to meet my needs. In fact, one of the things I have learned recently is that I think a lot of my trust in other people, my dependence on other people, sometimes running to people before even running to God, is because I want to keep them close. And when you've experienced loss, especially a death of a family member, any kind of loss, there's fear in that. There's fear that you're going to lose again. There's fear that something else is going to happen. And so I think it was very subtle. I didn't realize, I think through the beginning of our marriage, how much even when my husband, right, we all fail each other, right? We're human, but even my husband failed me or wasn't meeting a certain need that I had, that again, it's like, well, I was depending on him to meet that need. And then, it just kind of triggers that loss again, that grief of not, of like having a space to fill that person can't fill for you. And so I would say, especially in the last several years, our youngest is 4, but even before that, our marriage was just, it wasn't like all bad, but, we had these things between us, especially for me, like I said, my putting too much dependence on him to meet every single need, and then, his sometimes struggle and with not feeling like he could meet those needs. And, it affects his confidence and it affects our communication, all that. But I even experienced during part of our marriage about 9 years ago, I experienced some health issues. And then that, circumstances out of your control can put strain on marriage. And again, like those health issues, again, triggered loss. It took things away from me. I wasn't able to do certain things. And again, it's like, okay, but, what can you do for me, honey? What can you do to help me feel better? What can you do? And so really, Denisha, I can say truthfully and for myself that what I've learned about myself is that I was depending too much on people to meet my needs. And so, that you can become, can complain and become just discontent with your needs not being met. And then that can create conflict and that can create just struggles in your marriage. And, we had reached a point where the conflict just seemed like my husband thought I would never be happy with anything he did or didn't do. And for me, those unmet needs, that unhappiness really turned into acting out in anger. And that really became really destructive in our marriage. My husband's a very gracious man. Thank you, honey, for being so full of grace, so kind. And it was hard for him to see that in me. And even I look back and it still brings tears to my eyes of just, the hurt that my husband and my kids experience from that anger, that lashing out, because really it came down to fear. Like you said, I was afraid that nothing was going to change. I was looking to my husband. It's like, well, if only my husband did this, right? Sometimes we get caught in those if only, like if only this person did this, if only, then I'll be happy, then things will change. And so really, yeah, that anger, and anger is a secondary emotion. Denisha, I really believe anger can be tethered to so many different things in our hearts. And it's not something you can manage. Yeah. It's something you have to be freed from, and you have to find out what's behind that anger. And for me, it was fear, and it was depending too much on people, especially my husband, to meet needs that he was never going to be able to fill. And God really did not design a husband and wife to meet all of each other's needs. We're supposed to reflect the image of God to each other. We're supposed to complement each other, but God never designed spouse to meet all of our needs. But that really was the biggest struggle in our marriage, was that I was just so dependent on him to meet those needs that I became so discontented. And like I said, when things got hard and the conflict and the disunity continued, then there was this fear, like, will anything ever change? And that was hard, I think, for both of us, but it did. It did.
So tell us about that turning point. What did that look like for you guys?
Well, for us, I definitely encourage anyone who's listening that if you do just feel stuck, whether it's personally stuck or you just know your marriage is stuck, to reach out. I know that, you may not necessarily belong to a church or feel like you have somebody to reach out to, but there are really good Christian counselors, biblical counselors out there. We can even refer some on the Reclaim Story website. So I know for me, I started seeing a Christian counselor after my brother passed away, but for us, for our marriage, that was a turning point, but it really started with me. I knew that I was afraid nothing was going to change, but I had the courage to start with like, okay, I need to talk to somebody about this. And, what I really discovered during that time was that even if nothing ever changes, and that's what my counselor challenged me with, like, Valerie, what, and nothing against my husband, but like, what if he doesn't change? What if he can't meet this need for you? It's not a bad need you have, but what if he can't meet it? What if nothing ever changes? Can you still be satisfied in Christ and Christ alone? You can still choose joy. You can still choose to pursue him. You can still choose to love him. You can still choose to be satisfied and content in Christ's love for you. And that really was the turning point for me in a big way, because I realized that even growing up as a Christian, knowing God, believing in God, that I really, and I think many of us can relate to this, is that we all have areas that we need to mature in. And for me, it was, do I really depend on God? And like I said, during that surgery, just that recovery, really just examining is like, I have spent so much of my life depending on other people, which often leave you not as fulfilled and satisfied as you want to be. And that was the turning point, is that I was challenged with, like, if nothing changes, in the sense that if my husband can't meet those needs, I really trust God those needs. And if even if he doesn't do this or that, can I pursue him? Can I pursue can I trust God in him? Can I trust the work of Christ in him? So it really came down to depending on God to meet.
As you say that, the thought that comes in my mind is the Israelites and the manna. And I have always thought that, when something goes to happen at the beginning of COVID, I did not hoard toilet paper, but I'm not going to lie, I really stocked up on food.
Yeah.
Like I had a fear of not being able to feed my kids. And so I look at the example of the manna coming down each day. And that is such, wow, that would really challenge me to do that. And it sounds like that's right where he had you and where you were surrendering and waiting for him to depend on, to provide.
Well, and I've been studying that passage too, because I know you're going to mention probably a little bit later and give some information, but I'll be giving a talk about this and sharing my story in an online women's conference in April. But I've been really fascinated by really studying this story and about God's provision. And I was thinking about how, just even in my story, my marriage, how God's provision is not always what we see as, we want our needs to be filled, right? Like that's in our marriages, in our friendships, our relationships, like that was my struggle. I want these needs to be filled, and God is a God who can fill our need. But I also believe that God provides by sometimes creating a need for more of him. And so that, like I said, that was that turning point, is that God created this space of lack, so to speak, that, you've been depending on the flesh, on humans to meet your needs, but I'm creating this need for dependence on me. And that is how God provides. That's how God provides us the opportunity to get to know him and to know who he can be for us, is because sometimes he creates that need. And also just the idea that if you look at how he provided the manna, and he provided meat, and the manna was just enough to sustain them, but then the meat satisfied them. But then, the continual wandering and dependence on God, like I said, sometimes God creates that need so we can be more like him, which is, we say in the Bible that's sanctification. So sometimes God's provision is sustaining. And I know some of you may be listening, it's like, I don't know if I can just do this one more day. And sometimes God, just like the Israelites, he gave them manna. He said, just collect enough for that day. And sometimes that's so hard to be in that place of trust. It's like, do I trust God to give me enough to love my husband for today, to give me enough to trust that he is going to meet my needs for today? He will.
I love what you just said there too about he creates a need for more of him. The fact that he didn't dump a year's supply of manna down, right? And they would have, stuffed it in their backpacks and carried on. He definitely
forgot about him.
Exactly. Isn't that true? That's a lot to think about right there too. Mm-hmm. So Valerie, what would you say to a woman who is listening right now, who's maybe struggling in her marriage and has a fear of what if nothing changes? And I just want to say too that we're not talking about a situation where you might be experiencing physical abuse.
Yes, yeah.
That is definitely in a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about that discontentment, that things are not the way I thought. I'm not having my needs met. Mm-hmm. What would you say to a woman who's listening? Because I know she's listening. What would you say to her? What would encouragement could you pass on to her?
Well, I would definitely say that if you have a relationship with God, that and often we know, even when we have a relationship with God, we know logically, we know we've read our Bibles and like, okay, I know God is there. I know God can meet my needs, but I think it's, like I said, it's so easy to not run to him first. And believe me, I get it. And there's no judgment there because like I told you in my story, I've known God since an early age and still have struggled with running to him first. But I do believe that God creates, God moves us and creates opportunities for us to be in need because he wants to show us that only he can meet our needs. And I'm not saying people, we know that God uses people to provide food for the poor and to provide an encouraging conversation. Like God uses us to meet people's needs, but ultimately the satisfaction and fulfillment of every need you will ever have comes from God and God alone. And so I would encourage every woman listening who may feel that they're in, like the Israelites, just a dry season of marriage to pursue God. And I know that sounds like such a big description, but for me, yeah, I hope that you don't have to be like me and be on bed rest, but sometimes it just starts with prayer. And like God is not afraid of your feelings. God created your feelings. And so you can talk to him and just start with just talking to him, pouring out your heart. He wants us to come with him with broken and burdened hearts. And that's where he meets us. And so just accepting, I know it's hard, but just accepting and sitting in that place of need and moving toward the Lord, leaning on God, pursuing Christ, because that's what I had to eventually choose to do. Was once I pursued Christ to meet those needs, then you know what? I stopped depending so much and waiting on my husband, and then I was able to choose joy in the pursuit of him, of my husband, and choose just the joy of meeting his needs. And so, yeah, just be honest with those needs and lay them before the Lord because he knows each and every one of them. But bring them to the Lord, pursue God, even if it's in a tear-filled prayer, and start there, but pursue God because he will always meet whatever need you have. And especially, like I said, it may be something that just sustains you. It may be something that really satisfies you, or it may be a struggle you have to endure a little bit longer just so that you can learn to be more like God and learn more of who God is. But yeah, pursue God, lay your needs before him.
It's wonderful. And I love too what you said, even if nothing changes, can I still choose joy? I love the active participation that you had in your process of God kind of taking you to that point where you had to choose some different things, some different patterns than maybe had been in the past. And that he really highlighted that to you. And as we lean into him, he shows us what we need to do. And sometimes it's not always about the other person changing. It's about giving God the opportunity to change us and trusting him with the outcome.
Yeah. I always say, if you want change to happen, let it begin with you. Let it begin with me. You know, like you look around and you know, just like even in our world, like we could say like, oh, we wish this was different. We wish this was different. But it's like, first, where does it start? It starts with us. What can I do different to help create change?
That's good. Boy, that's a whole nother podcast too, huh? Of what the fear of what if nothing changes in our world right now. Boy, that's a whole nother talk we could have, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, it's so true. What can I do with me? I love that. Valerie, thank you for sharing your story today. And I know this is the first of many podcasts that you're going to be on with us because you have just so much, just rich wisdom for us and for sharing things that have happened in your life. So I appreciate you being willing to be so vulnerable and honest, and also for your hubby for allowing you to just share that wisdom and that walk, because that's something we can all learn from. And now, if people want to connect with you, how can they connect with you?
Well, like I mentioned, I have an online ministry through Facebook. So it's a private Facebook group that you can search and be invited to. And it's called Unveiled and Free. That was the name God gave me because it's my heart to help provide a safe place, a safe community for women to share their struggles, for us to walk through our struggles together, but not only just share and walk through them, but see what the truth of God, who God is and what his word says, how we can shine that truth on our struggles. And and just taking off our mask that we wear that hide those struggles, that hide the shame, that hide the pain. And so we really can live unveiled and free to be who God created us to be. So you can find me on that Facebook group. And I also have a website under construction at ValerieLMcMahon.com, and that's coming soon. So people can connect with me on Instagram and also find a few of my teaching videos on YouTube.
That's awesome. And you're also on the inside of our private Facebook group, Living the Reclaimed Life. Yeah. So I get to listen and learn from Valerie in Unveiled and Free. And then I have the privilege of serving alongside her in Living the Reclaimed Life. So that's super fun. So thank you so much for coming. And I know you'll be on again.
It was fun, as always.
Thanks for listening. I pray that you found hope in today's conversation and maybe even feel a little less alone in your story. Stay connected with us on Facebook and Instagram at Reclaimed Story. Want to learn more about living a reclaimed life and how you can be a part of our growing community of reclaimers? Check out our website at reclaimedstory.com. All of those links and more will be in the show notes, including an opportunity to sponsor an episode just like this. If you enjoy this inspirational podcast, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. That is a huge help for us in reaching more people to help live the reclaimed life. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you same time, same place next week.